are back. We're live. We're live. It's Thursday. It's probably my favorite part of the week is going live with the art of advocacy. Oh my gosh, the art of advocacy. Okay. I'm your host, Dr. Sheldon Eakins, host of the Leading Equity podcast, and also the founder of the Leading Equity Center, and also the host of the Art of Advocacy. So I'm excited to be here today. As always, today's show is sponsored by Leading Equity, becoming an advocate for all students. It is available right now. I'm going to give myself a hand clap on that one. It's available right now for pre-order. Let me clarify, for pre-order. It's available for pre-order. So if you haven't picked it up already, make sure that you grab your copy. By the way, if you're subscribed to the newsletter, and even if you aren't subscribed to the weekly newsletter, The Weekend Voice, you send me your receipt of purchase of the book, and I will add you to the list so that you can be a part of our free book study. Okay, a book study. You will get, oh man, I don't have it in front of me, but I want to say it's 4 sessions with me, 90 minutes each, and we'll basically walk through the book with me. That'll be fun. I look forward to that. I see Lisa is here. Lisa, thank you for joining us. Lisa has purchased her book. Lisa, did you already send me? I think you did. If you didn't, make sure you do, but I believe I got you on the list already. And I see Elizabeth Polo is here. What? You are on a spree, I believe. What is this? Almost every week? I don't know if you missed any of these. So thank you so much, Elizabeth, for joining us. If there's anybody else out there, just say hello. I see Popsy is here. Also, another regular. I appreciate Popsy for joining us. She has also been a guest on the Art of Advocacy as well. So thank you so much, Popsy, for joining us. Oh, yes. Thank you so much, Elizabeth. That means a lot. This work is fun. And it's people like you that makes it so much funner. So thank you so much. Yes. We got some good friends here. Yeah, we're making acquaintances. So today is going to be another. I got a special episode for you today. It's good. It's always great to be able to talk to people live. I have a good friend, Jodi Fernandez, is here. We're going to be talking about 4 steps towards change. Okay, if you want to be an anti-racist educator, if you want to be a disruptor, okay, if you want to go beyond, the typical things, and you want to really provide a voice and really create some changes, this is definitely an episode that you do not want to miss. I'm going to provide 4 strategies. Now, don't do the 4 strategies and think, oh, I did these 4, I'm good to go. No, I want you to understand that these are 4 things that we can do. There's always more that we can always do. But I'm so happy that Jody is here. So actually, I am going to briefly read her bio, and we're going to bring her on in just a moment. So Jodi Fernandez, a passionate educator of the African diaspora, over 15 years, creator, writer, director, and founder of Diasporic Dreams. If I said it wrong, Jody, you got to correct me. Okay, an edutainment experience corporation deeply committed to anti-racism, social justice, and teaching truth. So, without further ado, I'm bringing on Jodi Fernandez is here. Doesn't get any better than that, Jody. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Good evening. How are you? I love the energy. That's what I'm talking about.
Well, we got a fun topic to talk about, so we got to bring the energy today. So I'm glad you're here. Thank you so much. Now, I read, a sentence of your bio, but for those who aren't as familiar with you, could you share a little bit about yourself and what you currently do?
Absolutely. My name is Jodi Fernandez. I live and teach in New York. I teach in a suburb of Westchester County. And I've been teaching the African diaspora for 15th year. I'm going to my 16th year at the September 2022. And I want to say about 5-6 years ago, I had an incident with a student who presented as, let's just say, as racist, to put it mildly, and wound up finding myself in a situation where, I was correcting him and having him understand the meaning of domestic terrorism and how terrorists, can be white and male and very, very dangerous. And he recorded me and put me on the internet, and it went viral. And after that, I received death threats. I received some of the worst hate mail ever from people who simply didn't want to hear the truth. So instead of deciding to hide and, just marginalize myself, which my colleagues were basically trying to do, I started putting on Black history performances where I used entertainment to educate. And those became edutainment experiences. And fast forward 5 years later, I started my own organization, and that's Diasporic Dreams. And basically what we do, we're a group of anti-racist scholars who believe that the only way to eradicate injustice is to teach truth. And that's where I'm at now. So my organization is brand new. It's a baby, and I'm so proud of it. And we'll see what happens. But whatever it is, it's gonna be fire. I know, because kids are amazing. You just have to remind them of it.
That's what's up. First, well, the end part is what's up, not the beginning of your story. Is what's up. And folks, if you want to find out more information about the work that Jody's doing, there is a ticker at the bottom. Feel free to log on to diasporicdreams.org. Okay, it's right there for you. Now, I'm really sad to hear about what you shared as far as your story in the beginning. But I'm also excited and glad to hear that you didn't let that keep you down. You were able to press forward, and as a result of that, it helped you provide a message. Being here in Idaho as a Black man and in Idaho, I that's kind of why I started the podcast, was because I just, man, listen, I'm not going to share all the different experiences that I was having, especially when I first got here, but it was just like a lot of stuff, and I'm like, I don't know what this is. And this, I grew up in the South, and in the South, I mean, it's blatant. It's out there. You know exactly where not to go. You know what stores not to go, what cities not to go to. It's out there. But when I moved here, it was a lot different. And so a lot of my experiences came from, working with students of color and working with students maybe with challenges with abilities or LGBTQ. And I was like, I don't know how to help them. And so the podcast started because I just wanted to know how I could be better to support the folks that I work with, and how I could survive in this type of an environment. So again, kudos to you for the work that you're doing.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
So, and you also have an award that you won. I would love for you to share a little bit about that.
So through the National Humanities Organization, I have been selected out of 20 teachers, 20 educators, and throughout the United States, and one from Scotland, to participate in a summer institute where we do, it's called Understanding the Long View of the African Diaspora, and it takes place at Prairie View A&M University this summer from July 5th to the 9th. And I'm super excited. And we're just going to do a deep dive as, believers in all things DEI, to use, I don't even like using that anymore because now that's become commercialized, but and just, justice, so that's how I'm going to be spending my time.
Congrats.
Super. Thank you so much.
And I dropped the link, folks, in the chat, or if not in the chat, in the comments. I dropped the links in the comment if you want to learn more about the program that's going to be happening July 5th. Now, is this something that people can apply to participate in?
Well, I am part of the original cohort, so I'll be. This is the first cohort, but they are looking forward to doing this every year. Nice. And hopefully, if everything goes right, I'll be coming back as a teacher and as a speaker. So so I'm with the first graduating class.
First graduating class. Mm-hmm. Big stuff. Now, you mentioned something I thought was interesting, because I'm kind of on this. We might be on the same page here.
Probably so.
DEI, DEI. You said that you're not a fan of DEI. Now, I've seen DEI. Well, I've seen DEI. I've seen Jedi. Adding justice in there, and then I've seen DEIJB. It just seems, which is belonging, and it just seems like depending on who I'm talking to or organization I'm going to work with, there's either an added letter, and it's kind of seemed as everything's lumped together as if it's one thing. I would love to kind of know your thoughts as far as why are you not such a big fan?
Well, what I have so many thoughts on it, but first I want to talk. It's kind of like the commercialization of education for me, right? So they identified diversity, equity, and inclusion, and now they've sort of like made it such like a catch-all where people think that if they went to one workshop or if they went to, they had a conversation and they could just place that on their resume, then they are no longer, required to do any more work. And I see that over and over again in education with, different initiatives that they lose their purpose so quickly because people just want this catch-all. It becomes formulaic. And it really bothers me. And, I can compare it to what's going on with Juneteenth. For so long, people who knew about Texas and about, enslaved people finding out about their freedom. And now you got Walmart trying to make ice cream, about it. So I can see by your face, we are so on point because it's just like, it's the same thing. So now I don't use DEI because now you've done, you've cheapened something that's so important to me because, and to like-minded educators where, it's about justice. It's about humanity. So those are my thoughts, my condensed thoughts, because I could go.
I hear you. I mean, and we got time. This is live. We can go as long as you want, so feel free. But I agree, and that was my fear because I grew up in Texas, so I always we celebrate Juneteenth as a kid. Like I knew all about it. And then and again, it's like you said, it's commercialized. Folks are out there selling this. I did not know that there was freaking ice cream. Juneteenth ice cream. What's the flavor? Yeah. What is it?
It was like what Neapolitan would be. Like it was disgusting. And then, I think that they took it off I don't know if it made it to the shelves, but they were advertising. They mean in Walmart advertising and on my feed, because my algorithms show, like woke stuff all the time. It was like, what? You know what I mean? So I think Walmart kind of like backpedaled on that one. But it's disgusting. It really is.
I saw because I didn't know much about Cinco de Mayo. And that has definitely gotten more and more commercialized, sell beer and alcohol and those kind of things. And then when I did some actual research, I found out that it's not even Mexican Independence Day. It's something else. And so I'm just like, whoa, again, we celebrate these things. And then we start to see businesses and companies market to not thinking about when we think about what Juneteenth is, that doesn't make me want to eat ice cream. And I'm sorry.
No,
it doesn't entice me to drink, to eat some ice cream. Doesn't entice me to do anything else like that. So I definitely don't want to feed into a commercialized holiday. And it's unfortunate that, again, and I said this last year when they passed the law, it's like, wait, so we're making Juneteenth a federal holiday, but I can't talk about it because of all this critical race stuff.
Yep. It's ridiculous. It's manufacturing our pain. It's capitalizing on, everything that's happened to us. And we shouldn't let it happen. No,
I agree. I saw folks just excited for another day off.
Yeah.
They were like, what is Juneteenth? Oh, it's another day off. Let's pass the law. But again, not really understanding, what it really means to us, to Black folks, especially, and folks.
Absolutely.
It's crazy. Elizabeth says it's about the principle. I like that. Thank you for saying that. Now, I want to get into today's topic because you're going to be sharing with us some strategies. And so I want you to lay the groundwork as to how you came about these strategies and what you want the audience to take away from.
Okay, so I'll go back to my first reading of Kendi's work, How to Be an Anti-Racist. And for me, it was transformative because not only because he's brilliant, because he's been brilliant, but because he gave sort of like a blueprint to his readers. And that made me think of how I could be of more value to my mostly racist colleagues, on just to see the bigger picture. So I thought about how I could incorporate that in just some literature that I came up with on my own about anti-racist teachers and educators. That's really what it was. I was so inspired by his work, and I said, how could I implement this in my own pedagogy, of course, but then share it with educators.
Okay. Thank you. So that makes sense. So this is kind of like Kendi's work, which is a good book, How to Be an Anti-Racist book. Man, I remember a couple of summers ago, you couldn't even find it. It was flying off the shelf. I mean, it was sold out everywhere. That book and White Fragility were the two that like, and Bettina Love's book. We want to do more than survive.
I love her.
Yeah. So those books, you couldn't find them. And I appreciate the work that Kendi has done, and I'm very, one of these days I'm gonna get him on my show. So if anybody out there has a plug, please hook me up, because I would love to have him on. But okay, so based off of that, and just kind of your own personal experiences, let's start with the first one. Let's start with the first strategy that you have, and folks out there, I do want to, Jody and I, we want to make sure that it's clear. This is not 4 things that you need to do, and you're certified anti-racist educator. That is not what we're saying here. But these are 4 strategies. So why don't you start us off with the first one, Jody?
Sure. And even before that, I'd like to preface it with this being a shift in mindset, even more than 4 strategies. So let's just talk about what it means to be an anti-racist teacher or educator. That's someone who understands that racist ideas lead to racist policies that disproportionately affect Black kids. Let's just call it what it is. So an anti-racist educator is committed to the erasure of those racist ideas that produce and normalize the racial inequalities that exist in our educational system. So that's just an overview of what I'm talking about, why this is important. So first,
it's the action, right? It's the action behind it, because in his book he talks about you can't be neutral, you can't,
exactly, you have to push against it, right? So the first strategy is about re-education. So educators, yes, at minimum, I know in New York, you have to have your master's degree, and they feel like they've taken the certification exams, on the high school level, and I'm good to go. I might have taken my one, multicultural education class, and now I'm ready to teach all the Black and brown kids, and I'm amazing, right? No, so you need to be re-educated, in my opinion, on anti-racist philosophy or ideology. That's not happening. But that's where you have to start. And if it's not mandatory for your educational program, then you have to take responsibility and seek out the information because it's there. So
let me ask you this. I'm sorry. The re-education, just so I'm clear. So are we saying that if I went to a teacher prep program, let's say I went to University of such and such and got my teacher's license, what we learned in school, we need to reevaluate or re-educate ourselves? I just want to make sure that's clear.
We need to supplement, and we need to, when I call it re-education, because receiving that master's in education does not mean that in any shape, form, or fashion that you're anti-racist. It's not even part of the curriculum. So, re-educate. So do more educating and look at it from a different lens. Like, how about you look at everything you learn from an anti-racist lens, right? Because once you get the philosophy and the ideology down, and it's not a hard thing to understand, it's about fighting against racism, even when it's in a joke, even when it's in, colorblind racism. I don't see color. That's racist. Yes, you do. and you're trying to get by with saying that you don't, so that you don't have to hold yourself accountable for anything. So that's why I'm calling it re-education, because changing the lens through which you've learned about pedagogy and you've learned about your content area, I think that's very, very important. So educate yourself on anti-racism, and that would encompass taking like implicit bias tests. They're available ad nauseum on the internet. Harvard has a great one. I could drop the link for that one. And there's a quote I'll share that inspired the strategy. He says that anything you can learn, you can unlearn, and you have to unlearn bigotry. So some of the educators that come out of these wonderful prep programs, like NYU has, great teacher education programs. They know nothing about anti-racism. And how do I know? Because I work with them. You know what I mean? They're like, I went to Columbia, and you're racist. Exactly. So that's my first step. Super easy.
Let me ask you this then, Jody, because I could hear in the back of my head, I can hear people say, "Oh, but Jody, I have my master's degree in social justice, or I have my master's degree in diversity, or I have my," like folks will say, "Well, I got my degree in DEI related field or specialty, so you're not talking about me." What are your thoughts in that sense?
Oh, I love that's such a challenging question. I love that. Well, you can have all of those things, and that's wonderful. But do you understand that you must be anti-racist? So, if you can't tell me the principles of anti-racism that you learned from, your master's program in social justice, then I'm talking to you. You need to be re-educated. That it's just that simple.
But I did my thesis or I did my dissertation on so it's same answer.
Right. Again, in order to effectively teach children, you have to be an anti-racist. There's no way around it. And Black people too, people of color as well, right? You have to understand that although race is a social construct, racism is real. And the only way to eradicate that is to push against it in every way that you can, to counter it.
I'm so glad you're saying this, right? Because here's the thing. People tell me, "Oh, you're the equity expert, Sheldon." And I always say, no, there's so much that I'm constantly reading books. I'm constantly reading publications. I'm constantly interviewing people. I'm trying to learn as much as I can. I do not believe that there is I've arrived. I think it's a journey that we're all on, and we're in different places within that journey. But yeah, even like, and you said, as even people of color, saying, there's work that we can do as well. Yes, we have a lot of us, I would imagine, have lived experiences that we can pull from, but there is so much that we have to learn. And I am nowhere near at a place where I could confidently say I know everything. I'm a full-fledged anti-racist educator. I am striving to be one, but I think there's just so much work that needs to be done, and it's a continual process, not just a one and done thing.
Right. They say that the smartest people know that we know nothing. Right. There's so much more for us to learn, And if I had if I was in administration, which I'm not, by choice, it would be mandatory implicit bias testing to come in my school. You know what I mean? Because you're going to have to confront your biases. And I know for a fact that that's not happening. The only people who are doing this work are people who are intrinsically motivated, or maybe it's their, they feel like they have some stake in the game. But for the most part, it's not happening.
Yeah, I did a session not too long, a webinar not too long ago, and I tried to explain to people, sometimes, especially if you're not a person of color and we're discussing a racial matter, and I'm trying to explain to you, like, here's my lens, or here's an experience that I had, here's where I'm coming from. I'm trying to help you understand where I'm coming from. That individual, and I read this in D'Angelo's book, her latest one, nice racism. And she basically said something to the aspect of, a lot of white people that are receiving this information and are, in these professional developments and these trainings, they can go home and they can say, you know what, yeah, I like some of what was told or what was taught today, but I don't agree with everything. And so, and they can kind of operate based off of that day or whatever going forward. Where folks like us, we don't necessarily have like I don't get that privilege to choose to turn things on and off. It's just this is my lived experience every single day. So I'm glad you brought that up. Now, we could talk about step one, or sorry, not step one, but strategy one,
Mhm.
framework one all day. But let's move to number two. I would love to hear what you have for the second one.
Okay. So strategy number two is also simple because an anti-racist person knows that individuals are individuals, irrespective of race. A person is a person. And until you, as an educator, start to really believe and see yourself in each and every student, that doesn't mean that you know that they're black or you know that they're Latinx and you're white or vice versa, but you see the human connection, you're not going to be able to teach them as well as you could. Some kids will do well regardless of how, terrible the teacher is or how disconnected the teacher is. But that's not the reality for most of our kids because they don't have resources at their disposal to supplement what they're not getting from their educators. So strategy number two is simple, but it's hard. It's get to know your students, like for real, for real. What does that mean? That means that you must engage in dialogue with them, talk to them about them, talk to them about their heroes. If your kid is Dominican, if you have Dominican kids, find out who's important to them, who are their heroes, who's important in the musical landscape. Um, Take photos of them, of their family, make them human. And it seems very simple, but unless you really are treating each kid as as human as you are, you're not going to be able to effectively teach them or be anti-racist.
It sounds like such a basic thing. I mean, I have a whole chapter, actually, I have two chapters dedicated to getting to know students inside and outside of the classroom. Because sometimes we just say, "Oh, get to know your students,"
Mhm,
and so we would do the little inventory survey, and when's your birthday? What's your favorite color? What's your favorite movie? All the little basics of what kind of music you like, which is helpful. But then sometimes that's it. We'll survey them in the beginning of the year, and none of that comes up during the school year. Because when we talk about being culturally responsive or culturally relevant, you have all this feedback. You have all the kids have told you this is exactly what will help me out because these are my interests. We never use any of that data that we've collected in the beginning of the
never
year.
did.
Is
Mhm,
yeah. And
mhm,
so I talk about not only is it important to get to know, like you said, on a personal level, your students inside the classroom. But if you have opportunities to get to know your students outside of the classroom, it's even better because the kids are performing or the kids aren't always themselves when they enter into your space, right? Because
mhm,
we have classroom management, we have protocol. When you come into the classroom, this is how you come in. When you sit down, this is how you sit down. This is how you do this. You raise your hand. So kids aren't always themselves like inside the class. When you get to see kids outside of like at a basketball game or performing for something or in their community
mhm,
events and see kids outside of that, you're going to see a totally different form of children because they're in their space, they're in their element. So I'm so glad that
mhm,
that's listed in here. um Now when you say get to know your students, give us some examples. All right, what are some
mhm,
things that we can do, some tangible steps like let's, if you're still in school or if you're planning for next school year,
mhm.
that you can do immediately.
Okay, so you know what? I'll give an example. So, say I'm a chemistry teacher, right? And I'm teaching high school, and I have a student who is just seems like his head is down or he's not invested.
Mhm.
What I know for sure because I study human behavior, nobody wants to suck at anything, right? Like nobody is like, yo, I just don't want to do well. It's basically that there's no buy-in between your maybe whack lessons or your cookie cutter way of approaching education and that kid in your classroom. So it's not that they're unmotivated. It's not that they don't care about education. It's just that you haven't found out who they are in order to strike up enough of conversation to see how they could navigate your curriculum so that they could be successful. That doesn't mean that everybody's going to get a 90 in chemistry, but you can ask, let's just call him Peter. You can ask Peter, well, what are your goals? What are you looking to do after school? After, high school, talking to them and trying to figure out like how you can best help them get the most out of your curriculum as two people. Because, if they're in class, if they've made it to the classroom, if they've made it to the school, really, then they're halfway there, because they could very well not be in school. So that's what I mean by get to know them, find out like what they want to do, like what their goals are. Now, everybody doesn't have to love science, but you need that. That's another step in getting your high school diploma. So, just making that connection, getting that buy-in. And it's not as hard as you think. I think all of those silly inventories and stuff, they take way more time than chopping it up with kids. And that is what I know for sure, that nobody sets out, no student, no human sets out to suck, right? It doesn't feel good. I don't think as humans, like anybody wants that. It's just no buy-in, or, the other things, like they don't feel safe in your classroom. They feel walking into your classroom makes them feel stupid. So they're either going to act out, right? Or they're going to check out. So
I like that. Yeah. When I was on the reservation working at the school there, I mean, one of the things I love to do is go to powwows, because you get to see like your kids dancing in like outside. Like, I was a special ed director. So we had a resource room. We called it the extended learning program. We tried not to say special ed, but the way we, when the kids would come in, they're one way, I chop it up with my students, and we had our own like nicknames, and we had, inside jokes, and I always tried to make sure I had a rapport with my students individually, not just, as groups, groups of, my 8th graders. No, it was this student, and that student. That's how I try to operate. But when I would see them on stage, see them dancing, see them fellowshipping with one another and family members. And I would talk to them and ask them about their attire that they had on. And, they would tell me about the background story behind the beating and the eagle feathers. And I mean, I learned so much while I was out there. And just think about how I could. And so because I was learning all of those things about their culture, I was able to bring stuff into the classroom as well that they could relate to. So I found out that they like Troy Polamalu. A lot of my students did. He's an NFL player, but he's Pacific Islander. And so like they could really relate to a lot of the stuff. So I would bring these different examples in, and that wasn't just a one thing, it's November, and so it's Native American Heritage Month. No, that was something I try to do on a regular basis, and not just something that I would, one and done tokenized celebration.
Mm-hmm. I'll give you a good example. I'm thinking about one kid in particular. I won't say his name, obviously. I remember I used to do what we call Haas's Way. So it's like after school with the kids who are suspended. They come after school, and Monday is English, Tuesday social studies, and they get some of the instruction. And this kid was was suspended. So he was in 8th grade. This was 3 years ago. I got him as an 11th grader last year. He checked every box for behavior issues, and we were hybrid. So he was like one of 4 kids that were physically in the class, and the rest were virtual. I mean, he was on the phone loud. He was jumping up and down, asking for a pass. There wasn't even anybody in the school. So he was getting on my nerves, right? So I'm trying to teach. And so I walked by him, and I heard him singing. And his voice, I mean, it was so good that I was like, you sound like Giveon, who's a newer artist. You sound exactly like Giveon. He was like, what you know about Giveon, miss? I said, I know everything about Giveon. You know what I mean? And from there, we just started like vibing, and he is a sweetheart. Yes, he has ADHD. Like, yes, we know that, he's diagnosed. But that's what it is. I saw him as a person, and it wasn't, as they say, cap. It was real. Like, his voice was amazing. And come to find out, he's an amazing visual artist. He is like, what do they call it? A Renaissance man. Like, he does everything.
Yeah.
And get on your nerves. And he still gets on my nerves. But some people get on people's nerves, right? But he's an amazing, amazing human. And he's passed English 11, which was last year, and African Diaspora this year. So that's getting to know your students.
So, okay, all right. So let me ask you a question regarding that. So, like his other teachers, were they still having challenges with him? And was it? Do you believe that it was part of your relationship building with the student that really helped things to get better for you and your and his success in your class?
Well, I know it is because I had to call his house a couple of times because he would just walk out the room. And when I went into PLP, which is sort of like our database, because we have to, identify every time we make contact, I saw that the psychologist was there a lot. You know what I mean? Like making contact with his parent. So I reached out to the psychologist, and she's like, "Oh, yeah, he has ADHD." I was like, "Yes, of course I know that because I read his IEP." And then she was just saying, but he loves your class. And I'm just like, well, like he's got to calm down a little bit. You know what I mean? And
Mhm.
she's like, but don't worry, like you're doing the best. He loves coming to your class, loves you, and people are different. So yes, he's still going to be a little loud. He's going to be singing Giveon, but he also did his work. And he didn't have the same relationships with all of the rest of his teachers. So
Gotta give you a hand clap for that one. That's some big stuff. That's some good stuff. And you got me singing. Was it Heartbreak Anniversary?
yes, and he's
That's
been
my
in my
jam right there. That's my
he's in
jam.
Diasporic Dreams now. He's a dancer.
Oh yeah.
He's amazing. Yeah, his parents are Jamaican. Amazing dancer. Like so, and
That's
he can
what's up.
sing and he can draw. Yeah.
Well, good for you. Okay, and Elizabeth has a hand clap as well. Good stuff. That's some big stuff right there. Amazing,
Thank
says
you.
Angela. You're doing good work. So we talked about. So I wrote it down. So re-educate yourself was part. I don't know how to call. Do we want to call them framework,
Strategy
concept,
work, not
conceptual
framework. I like better, right? Because it's a
framework?
framing. Yeah.
Okay, all right. So we'll do that. So framework one was re-educate yourself. Okay. And we went into that. And then we moved into getting to know your students. What would be number three?
Number three, I have be a coach, be a flexible coach instead of a traditional teacher.
Okay.
Um, I got to give my husband a little bit of credit for that because I married a man who is like watches all the sports. I'm like, how you like hockey? Like you don't really like hockey, like all of the sports. And I started to think about like the relationships that coaches have with their players, and versus or when you juxtapose that with a lot of educators and their students. And I started to realize that like coaches know their stuff. They know their subject matter, whether it's baseball or football or hockey, right? But they have this mastery of the congruence between, for educators it would be the pedagogy, or for the coaches it would be the actual like science behind the sport, and then the different learning styles, right? So they understand that this is what you need. And excuse my ignorance because I'm gonna mix up baseball and all of that, right?
Uh-oh.
But
Uh-oh.
you got to understand. Now, I might do that, right? But how does this person play? What does this person need, as opposed to what the game needs from them? So I started to think about that, and I was like, how about we like approach this as coaches, right? So
Mhm.
coaches always focus on making the connections, and they don't treat, and I can't speak for all coaches, but what I've begun to be able to observe and appreciate about coaches is that they treat different players differently. They give the players what they need. You're not going to
Mhm.
ride the same kid the same way. So it's about who you are and what you bring to the game, of education, more than about what So that's a lesson that I had to actually learn from my husband, because I used to be anti-sports. I used to be very, very like, no, we're gonna educate this mind, and I don't know, go ahead with your basketball. Like I was one of those people, until he started to really like explain to me all of the great benefits of sports. And yeah, so the best teachers that I've observed or read work from, they always approach it as, kind of like how coaches are, And especially with the internet, because a lot of this stuff these kids could teach themselves, right?
Sure.
Like a lot of our content is right out there, right? It's just
Mhm.
how. So learning the learning styles, giving them what they need emotionally is so important. Getting a little harder with them when they need that. Some kids you can be stern with, and some kids you cannot. Some kids you can hug, even though we're not supposed to, and some kids you better not, because you're gonna get in trouble. So that's number 3, is to approach education from the lens of like a flexible coach than of a traditional teacher.
Okay. So I want to make sure, because I want to make sure our audience is clear on the difference with the coach approach towards a traditional teacher standing in front of the room teaching a class. What I just want to make sure that you can clarify the differences between the two. I get what a coach is. I do watch. I don't watch everything. I can't do hockey. I don't understand what's going on over there. But I just want to make sure that it's clear.
All right. So let me explain my analogy. Right. So I'm a humanities teacher. Right. So I am. My goal is not to stuff information into them. Right. It's to expose them to information.
Right.
And give them the tools so that they could take in the information in the way that they learn best. And that's what coaches do. You know what I mean? So it's just like, if I have a kid who's auditory, then you know what? Why does he have to, take notes when he can, if when I assess him, he understands that. I don't need everybody taking a bunch of notes, at the same time. Maybe he can use his phone to do a voice memo. Why can't I do that? He learns best. You know what I mean? So that's what I mean by the flexibility of a coach versus the kind of like staunch traditional teaching methods. And who says we have to do that? I mean, you know what I mean? I think that's what we're talking about with learning styles, right? So I like the analogy because it pushed me out of my comfort zone, because I don't even like sports, really. You know what I mean? But all the kids
You're
do.
killing me. You're killing me not liking sports, but it's all good.
I'm just being honest, but I don't know. Most of the kids
good.
do. And that's where, and I noticed, I came up with that because I noticed that most of my kids are invested in some sport.
Yeah.
I would say 75%. And the way that they love, you know what I mean, their teammates, and they go hard. They might not go to any of their classes, but they go into practice. It's something to be said for that, and I just think that if I can relearn that, you know what I mean, because that's my relearning, and take the benefit of that. I know other teachers could do it because Americans like sports. Like, you know what I mean? That's a very American thing. I'm the one that's different,
So would you say that a classroom, if the teacher is the coach, so a classroom should be looked at as the students in the classroom should be looked at as a team? So like there's okay, and so camaraderie and having each other.
Well, as
so
a family. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. Like just how teams are usually like families. Yeah. And that's where my thinking came from. And it's just like, no, if you see Dima over there, she's floundering, and you're done, you go help Dima. Because and that's why I don't have, the behavior problems, because we all help each other. Like we don't do that, So that's exact. I like how you boiled that down. That's exactly what I'm talking about, because I watched that with the kids. And another thing that led me to incorporating that as a strategy, I've had so many kids that are like, I love you, miss, but why don't you come to my games? And I'm gonna be honest, I'd be like, oh man, like I don't really want to go to any games, Again, showing me how important that is. So I was like, I gotta do better.
You gotta do better. I listen. I'll tell you a quick story on that. So I had one of my students had a soccer game, and they made it to the playoffs, and he had championship game, and he invited me to the game, and I don't know what happened, but I just could not make I had told him I was coming, and something happened, and I just was unable to make it. And I saw him at school the next day, and the first thing he said to me, he was like, "You didn't come to my game, Mr. Eakins." And I felt so bad because how important is it for a student to how much does it mean for a student to look in the stands? Not only do they see their parents or guardians and their close friends, but they also see their teachers
Yeah.
in the cheering them on, posters, wave, like dressing, all the all of that, just going all out for them. And I felt so bad. Like that happened, I don't know, 7-8 years ago. And just listening to you tell me about, it just reminded me, like, yeah, it was that one time that I don't know what happened, but I missed his event, and it was a championship game. They won, and I wasn't there for him.
Yeah.
So I think that, and that's the part of the, getting to know kids, not just know them inside the classroom and know them personally on that, but also knowing them outside of the classrooms and watching them shine and watching them excel, doing the things that they love to do.
Yeah. And sometimes you'll come to find out that, they may not love your subject, but if you can make the connection. I'm thinking about another student who he's like into cars, and he just wants to talk about cars, and we connected on that. You know what I mean? And he's like, oh, come to my job. And I think he works at like Mavis or one of those places. And he's like, oh, I'll hook you up. And I'm like, but when you're gonna come for like 5 days in a row, let's make a deal, you know what I mean? And we always like joke around. He's like, he'd be like, come to my job. I'd be like, come to my class. Like,
yeah, come to my class. Come to my job. You know what I'm saying?
That's my job.
Yeah.
But we have, he's walking into the class with a smile. We're making a human connection. And there's never been a time when he is in the classroom, this particular student, I don't have to ask him to put away his phone. I just like, you want to put that away? Like there's no fight, and he's participating and we have a good time. Is he going to get a 90? Nope. But he's going to, you know what I'm saying? That's not everybody's ministry. You know what I'm saying? But he's going to pass,
That's part of the coaching up. So, you serving as a coach, you can get him to that 90%, and then help him improve on that. So, and just thinking about his needs. So, I mean, we'll never say never, but we definitely, I think that could be an opportunity for him. So that's good. I am enjoying this conversation, by the way, Jody. So thank you again for being
on. As am I. Like the energy is just like, you should come to my school. Yeah, right.
Go to your job. Yeah.
Come to my job. Pull up on me. They be like, just and wear that shirt too. Because like, oh boy.
I love wearing this shirt, and I like the stares that I get. I like the questions and the stares that I get. So re-educate yourself, get to know your students, be a coach. What's number 4?
All right. The final framework is commit to being an anti-racist policy pioneer and activist. So that one is a little loaded, and this is the one that takes, in my opinion, the most courage. So we're gonna have to start putting ourselves out there, myself included. When they ask us about some ideas about improvement, how about we raise our hand and say, can we have anti-racist training? Can we rewrite the code of conduct to make sure that the language doesn't allow for disparities to continue? When you go into the staff room, the common areas, and you hear the jokes, and you hear, your colleagues making fun of students, because we all hear it, making these jokes about race that seem like they're, harmless or benign. We have to stand up and say, nope, that's not okay, because that's where it comes from. And that's really where, it's scary, and it can be daunting, and everybody is not assertive like that. But if we want to call ourselves educators, we got to be fearless. We do, because I don't see it changing if we're not, so that's what I mean by being pioneers and being activists, and stop, again, jacking this whole DEI stuff and saying that you're committed to social justice, and you listen to nonsense, and you participate in nonsense, and then you want to wonder why things don't change. So it's lonely too, but the more of us that do it, the more of us will feel comfortable, stepping up. So that's number 4, make that commitment. be an act. It's dope to be an activist. Like you
Yeah.
want, right? Like educators, shouldn't we be activists?
Yeah, it's okay. So I did a training a couple years back at a predominantly white school, and I was talking about you got to. And it was right. It was like summer. Kenny's book comes out, so like the PD was in August or somewhere around there. So it was like right before school started, and I talked to a teacher afterwards. It was actually a principal. I was talking to her, and she was like, "Okay, so basically, what you're saying, there is no neutral, is what Dr. Kennedy's saying. Either you're racist or you're anti-racist. There's no in between." And she gave me a scenario. Well, basically, it was kind of like she was in a conversation, and she saw a white colleague do something to someone that was very racist, and they were across the room, and she just didn't see a way to kind of address it. And so she was just trying to understand a little bit further as far as the neutral piece, because like what if I'm in a situation where I can't go and do stuff, or I can't, I just feel like I'm just not in a space to be able to address things. And my response to her was, here's the thing. When it comes to a lot of this work, and like I'm a person of color, and I said, you know what, there's going to be a lot of conversations that people just won't say around me, but they'll say it around you. And they're going to test and see, are you comfortable with what we're saying, or are you going to speak up and speak out against it? They won't say certain things to me in my presence. They'll have their little jokes. I mean, I've learned all kind of stuff over the years about certain things that I would have never have come across had someone not opened up and said, this is something that was kind of what we would say about y'all. And so I said, you're in a position where you can actually speak up, because I just won't be in that. It won't happen to me. And so I could see her gears turning, and I could see her nodding her head and think, oh, I guess he does make a point. I said, think about maybe when you're at Thanksgiving, or when you're at an event, and there's no people of color, or it's just your family and things, and Uncle Buck or Uncle John or Auntie Sue or whoever says something. What is your response in these type of situations? Because Auntie Sue won't say it in front of me.
Right.
And so I think that it's really important that when we say we're going to make a commitment to an anti-racist policy or anti-racist and become an anti-racist educator, and I don't think that you can arrive at that. I think that's a process. That's something that we're striving towards. But if that's what we're saying that we're going to do, then just keep in mind, depending on what you identify as, you may be in spaces where conversations, actions, things like that happen way more than it might happen to someone who identifies as something else.
Yeah. I'll give you a good example. And some of these stereotypes, they're so, they hide. And I'll give you an example. Like I have a colleague who is white and has biracial kids. And I would hear her say, when we first started working together, because we've been there about the same time, she would say stuff, like, oh, the Hispanic kids, they're neat. She would call them neat, N-E-A-T. And I would hear things like, oh, she's black, but she's super, and I remember when I first got to the job, I wouldn't say anything, but it would always bother me.
Yeah.
And I would say it took me a good 6 months where I started calling her out. You know what I mean? And that's before the wave, right? And this is what I tell the kids. I'm like, and they're like, but what do you mean? But I said, but has power. The little things,
Yeah.
Why on the contrary, as if there's an expectation already there, right? Of being black, and I've just, I've spoiled it for you, right? Or I've shocked you. And just little things like that. And so I was telling my kids, about the she's black, but, and they said, well, what do you say? I said, one word. She's black, and just one little word. You see what I'm saying? And it doesn't have to be confrontational. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to give them a dissertation, or it could be like, that's racist, that's not appropriate, and keep it moving.
Yeah.
So
it's and it takes practice. And you develop a level of comfort. And sometimes I've been in situations where I've missed it, and I just didn't feel like it was the right time to address it, and I came back later and talked to them, because I don't believe that you have to always like immediate shut it down right then and there. Sometimes you can you can come up to them later on and, hey, listen, yesterday when we were talking, you mentioned something. We were in a group of people. I didn't want to, I consider you a good friend, and I know you had the best intention, but I just kind of want to talk to you one-on-one. If that's cool, can we sit down? Can we chat? Like, I think that can go a long ways too. But sometimes people think, oh, you have to just address it immediately right then and there. But I said, no, sometimes when we're thinking about doing things tactfully, because sometimes it is your supervisor, sometimes it is your best friend, and you want to, or it's your mom, and we want to address these things. But sometimes we have to tactfully do so as well. But that's always been my stance. Some people will argue, no, it needs to happen right then and there, and it's unacceptable. And that's their approach. But for me, believe us or not, I'm a very introverted person. But being a very introverted person, sometimes I sit down, I reflect, I think about, okay, what's the best approach to what I witnessed or what I heard, what I saw, whatever. What's the best approach to address it? I don't want it to not be addressed, but I just, in this moment, is probably not the best for how I would come about it.
Yeah, that's dope, because I think that can even be more effective sometimes, because it gives you time to ponder and really think and to get your thoughts together. So what you deliver, you know what I mean, could be precise, and you can speak to the actual issue as opposed to the emotion that you felt based on the issue. So I like that. That's I agree. And everybody's process is not the same, right? So do what works for you. And I think the saying is like 100 people doing things wrong is better than them, one person doing it right.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, we'll get there. So I like that a lot.
All right. Thank you. So, okay. So we talked to, just to reiterate, those who, if you're just joining or anything like that, I'll let you run them down. Why don't you run down the 4 again?
Oh, sure. All right. So we're going back to the 4 frameworks for becoming setting out on the journey, let's say, of becoming an anti-racist educator. Number 1 is the re-education of the educator. So that means that you educate yourself, you make a commitment to anti-racist education. That could be in the form of obviously literature, attending workshops, those things, but specific to anti-racism, taking implicit bias tests to sort of start to think about your own biases and how you can challenge yourself to remove them. Number 2 is to get to know your students for real, not these check boxes with inventories, but through having real conversation with them, learning about them, what they like, who they like, who they are, what their family structures, what pastimes they're into. Number 3 is be a flexible coach instead of a traditional teacher. And number 4 is to make a commitment to being an anti-racist policy pioneer and activist.
Wow. Okay. Now, oh boy, that just snuck up on me. It's not a COVID cough, by the way. It just snuck up on me. I would say this. Some people might say, well, this is only, having a conversation about race. I think this is applicable to bias as well. So, we often will see, anti-bias, anti-racist work combined so that it doesn't just limit to race, but it also can expand upon other people. And we also have to keep in mind there's a lot of intersectionality between, there's a person of color can be disabled, can also, English as a second language, and LGBTQ, and all these different, they can have all these different identities as well. So I want to add, I would argue, and I think you would agree, that all 4 of these could be applicable to not just a racial or anti-racist standpoint, but also an anti-bias approach as well.
Absolutely.
Okay. Megan says, Miss Jody, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge, expertise, and experiences.
Thank you,
by the
Megan.
way, folks, if you have any questions, feel free to pop them in. We're going to start wrapping up in just a few minutes.
Already?
Yeah, it's, I told you this. I told you it's
like
gonna go by fast. It's gonna go by
We gotta
fast.
do it again.
We gotta have a part 2. You
Yeah.
should be on the. I'll get you on the podcast as well.
Oh,
So
fire.
we'll
All
get
right.
that set up. Yeah, I'll reach out to you and we'll talk about that. But folks, if you have any questions for Jody, feel free to put those in the comments. Jody, I want you to take it home. I would love for you to provide, I definitely consider you as providing a voice in leading equity. Why don't you give us one final word of advice to our listeners?
Oh, just one.
Two. If you got two, you can
Let's
give two.
see. I would go with anything you can learn, you can unlearn. Don't ever think that it's too late to do the work. Don't ever think like, well, I've been doing this so long, it doesn't matter. You can always do better. And it just takes a commitment. And just think about every single person who could be on the receiving end of one of your jokes or of your inaction. Think about that kid, who overheard the joke. Think about that person who, loved you as a teacher, thought you were amazing, but you didn't stand up for him or her when colleagues were saying something racist. Just think about that and make a commitment to do better.
Make a commitment and do better. Jody, if we got some folks that want to connect with you, what's the best way to reach you online?
I would say go to Love and Light 827. That's me on Instagram. I have another one, Diasporic _Dreams on Instagram. Let me make sure I got that right. And you could also check out the website, diasporicdreams.org.
Okay.
Okay.
And also there's a website down there right at the bottom in the scrolling across. So feel free to check out. Now, are there opportunities for folks to donate or contribute or help your organization out? Could you share a little bit about that?
Absolutely. So we are a 501c3. So all of your donations will be tax exempt to the extent that's permitted by law. There is a link on the website where you could donate through Zelle. And please check us out. You will be seeing a lot more from us. And if you've ever been to one of the performances, it's lit. These kids are amazing. And hopefully, maybe one day, Doc, you can come see one. Because I don't think we're going to do any more. Hopefully, it will be no more virtual performances. So it'll be live. Or we might be in a city near you. You never know.
Okay. You coming to Idaho? You coming to Pocatello?
Hey, why not? You need one more Black person anyway.
That'll put our numbers up. That'll be scary. We're at 0.8 for we're at 0.8 right now for the state.
Yo, so, and I'm wearing this shirt. Like, I swear to God, I'm getting that shirt. And I'm wearing this. I'm pulled up to Idaho. 2 disruptors.
Please. And folks, if you want the shirt, by the way, just go to destroythenorm.com. Destroythenorm.com. So if you're interested in a shirt, Jody, it is a pleasure. It's always a pleasure chopping it up with you. Again, we've done some work together in the past, so I appreciate everything that you're doing. I'm so happy for you. So please keep up the good work. Thank you so much.
Thank you. The pleasure is mine. Thank you so much. Have a good night.
Just to wrap things up as we start to close down, listen, that was a lot of fun being able to talk to Jody and discuss those 4. Again, this is not a certification. This is not hey, this is all you got to do. Just these 4 things and you're good to go. This is not a test. It's not a quiz. It's not an assessment. These are 4 strategies. There's still always work that you can do going forward. So that's really important. I think the one that really stood out to me was the coach. Listening to Jody explain her lack of understanding or lack of interest of sports and still be able to relate it to the classroom, and thinking about our schools as our classrooms, our students as teammates, as team members for a sport, and providing a coaching aspect is really important. So I'm just so thankful for her to come on and share this with us. She, by the way, if you're wanting to connect, there is her website is scrolling down there at the bottom. Also, if you are looking to connect with Jody via Instagram, I'm popping in her Instagram handle right there in the comments if you're watching on YouTube or on Facebook. Remember the words of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. If you can't fly, then run. If you can't run, then walk. If you can't walk, then crawl. But by all means, keep moving. Let's continue to be a voice in leading equity.